right, it's a little after 7 o'clock. I'll call this meeting to order. Dan, could you take a roll call, please?
Yep, Councilmember Gerard.
Here.
Councilmember Byström.
Present.
Councilmember Monson. Councilmember Husnick.
Here.
And Mayor Bain.
Here. All those that are able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Council members, in front of you on the dais, we have an updated agenda. And for those of you following either at home or in the audience, just please note we have added an item number 11, which is a closed session to discuss labor negotiations with the 49ers Union. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Next up, open forum. Thank you. And we have one item on open forum. Steve Schmalz. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor Bain, council members, my name is Steve Schmalz, and I'm representing the Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District, and we reside at 44 South Lake Street, which is the other half of the Kodiak Coffee Building down there. And I know we have some new council members here today, maybe not be familiar with the Watershed District. But our mission is really to protect and improve water quality in the streams and lakes around Forest Lake in the Watershed District. And starting with Forest Lake and Shields would be probably the best known lakes in the city. We also work with Comfort Lake, Little Comfort Lake north of the city, and also Moody and Bone Lakes northeast of the city. And we work with those lakes and those streams, and these are really important assets to the community. They're natural resources, and it's really kind of a signature natural resource for the city, Forest Lake is. So what I'm here for today, though, is to talk a little bit about our annual meeting, which is coming up. Marks the 20th year anniversary for the Watershed District, and we're having a special annual meeting on April 30th out at the Forest Hills Golf Club. It starts at 5:30 and goes to 7:30 or 8. And you should have already received a personal mail invitation. If you haven't, that's one reason why I'm here, is to personally invite you again to attend that meeting. I think the Watershed District is by far the best possible partner you have, the biggest partner you have as far as water quality projects and working together. Plus, we can be a source of grants for water quality projects. We've already worked together on the big street sweeping program, and we were able to gain a grant that paid for that $300,000 cleaning machine we've got. So we have some money and we can work together and work on water quality projects. So I encourage you to attend that meeting if at all possible. And I also want to thank you for assigning a liaison to our meetings. Sam has done that for the last year, and we appreciate his attendance. And we met Paul last night, or not last night, but last week for the first time. We'll look forward to seeing Paul. I know you all have busy schedules, and besides Paul coming, hopefully he'll be able to get there, but if you can't make the meeting, maybe you could stop by after work at 5:30. We have a half-hour social hour with some refreshments and hors d'oeuvres, and at least say hello to the board. Again, I want to thank you for working together with us, and we look forward to many years of working together and making this the best lake around here. So thank you. Anybody have any questions before I step down?
I just want to say thanks for the opportunity. It was a learning experience for me, certainly. And sorry about the meetings I did miss. I tried to make as many of them as I could. A lot of times it kind of collided with other meetings that I had, and so that's the only reason I didn't make it. But appreciate.
I'm very glad to have you there.
Appreciate the learning curve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next item, consent agenda approvals. I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda. and ask that we remove from the consent agenda item 6C.
I'd make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, removing 6C. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'd second if we can remove 6B also.
Perfect.
I will modify my motion to accommodate that.
All those in favor of approving items 6A and D through L? Signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. Item 6B, approve minutes from February 11th City Council meeting.
I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes from the February 11th City Council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain?
Abstain.
One abstention. Motion carries.
Madam Mayor, I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes from the March 25th City Council meeting.
I'll second.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
I take back that aye. I apologize. Oppose? And I will abstain. Sorry about that. All right, moving on to our regular agenda. Item 7A, update to financial management policies. Hannah, I believe you're going to take us through this.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Today, I'm just proposing an update to the financial management policies, just the expenditure policy portion. The biggest part of this change, previously in the financial policies, it stated that for an invoice approval, either Patrick or myself would have to approve that invoice before it went to the accounts payable department for payment. There's a lot of invoices that come through, as you guys know, that you approve each week. So instead of that process, we're proposing a change that a lot of other cities use as well, but moving to more approval limits. So this allows different levels of staff to be able to code, initial, or approve, and then hand that invoice in for payment to the accounts payable department. Those limits are for staff members, department directors, the city administrator, and then there is some, if it's a big enough expenditure, we're asking to then get approved by city council first. We do have an exception to the city council approval limit. So for instance, our legal or engineering bills are routinely over this $25,000 threshold. So on page 6, we are proposing some exceptions to that approval limit. So if they are listed there, if it's a regular request that is over that amount, that Patrick would then be able to approve that. The change is really nothing on the council side that you're seeing. This is just internally before the invoice goes into the computer. You'll still be getting the same reports at council. You'll still be approving them each council meeting. It's just that change on the front end. Department directors are responsible for their budgets, and since they're accountable, we'd really like them to have more hand in that game. There's just other small updates just due to some statute updates for bidding, as well as some older policies that we no longer follow in there. But I will be open to any questions.
I have a question, and maybe I missed it in the packet. The approval limits, now it'll take me a second to get back there. It says authorized staff members may approve invoices up to $500. Is there a separate list of which staff are authorized, or what's intended to be? Is that defined somewhere?
Go ahead.
It is not. We're just kind of using that as anyone who's not a department director is then kind of falling into that authorized staff member pool.
Is there any staff that would not be authorized? Is it truly an all staff, or how?
No, I don't think it's an all staff. I think that each department head will decide who's allowed to do that because they're responsible. But people like Chad, people like Donovan, that kind of level. I think if you're talking about utility maintenance worker, probably not, or a individual police officer, probably not. But just the ones that usually get the invoices. And most of the lower or field people don't see invoices anyway, so.
Right. Could we add that list as a appendix, or just create some sort of, just so there's clarification both on staff level, but then also on the auditor side, just on who the initiator is of an individual?
Sure.
I recognize they're under $500, but I think some clarification would be helpful. Other questions? Absolutely, go ahead.
At a level at $500, and you mentioned like Donovan, is that a high enough number to give them adequate approval. I noticed that we jumped from 500 to 15,000. So it is, should 1,000 or 1,500, so higher? And I have no opinion, I'm just trying to see why the big jump.
I think we're just following different approval processes that we've researched and know there's no magic in the $500. It's just what you're comfortable with. $1,000 wouldn't be out of line either, but I think we're pretty comfortable with the 500.
Okay.
And then one other question I guess I had, or maybe point of clarification. So part of the control structure is department heads reconciling to, or at least having updated budget reporting. I don't necessarily need to see it as part of the policy, but it'd be, when we talk about budget reporting, maybe that's part of a separate financial process that, I take all of that back. Maybe first, let me ask the question. How often are those produced and available to department heads? Because I think that's a key part of the control, is having that budget to actual, knowing especially that the budget numbers are gone through in a fine tooth comb, and that's really where we have areas of risk. So maybe start with the question first, and we can talk about how the policy addresses that.
Definitely. I will say formally, our quarterly reports are a big budget to actual for them, but also all of our department directors have access to our accounting system, and usually regularly, even sometimes weekly, I know that they'll go in and see how they're doing compared budget to actual.
So each department head has the ability to go in and run their own, and is that something, I'm seeing heads nodding as,
That's correct.
That's what we're doing? Okay.
And that would be our expectations as well.
Okay. And then formally, it comes as part of the financial packet, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or points? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the changes to the financial management policies as presented.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second, or a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
I just want to comment, I think it's my first year on here, and it's really a very thorough document. It is a little dry, but it's a very thorough document, so I appreciate all the work that's gone into it.
One other quick comment, I think it's important to note, there's a lot in this document that we aren't really considering tonight, and so let's have it be clear that we have reviewed and approved changes to this portion. There's a lot in that, especially in that investment policy section, that is kind of outside of the scope of what we're talking about tonight, but also not part of the intended conversation. Just wanted that to be clear. All right, with that, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Next up, we have the transfer of 2018 money, and I believe, this is Hannah, is you as well?
Yes. So with this, there's a number of documents that you have been provided that have supporting information in them to help us with this surplus decision, as well as some additional monies in excess of the reserve of the unadjusted fund balance. So in my staff report, there's some really good information in there, as well as I have handed out a couple extra documents. So I'll just start with those. So we have the statement of revenue and expenditures. There's also a couple pages behind that. They'll go over, some of those big variances, as well as our estimated cash and fund balances. These haven't been audited yet, but as close as we think that they will be. I think that these are helpful in helping to make this decision, as well as our equipment CIP and a projection of how that is going to shake out over the next 5 years. So with that, as you can see on the statement of revenue and expenditures, our surplus this year, or our revenues in excess of our expenditures, is about $580,000. And that comes from a number of things. A big part of it is we are over in license and permits, a big part of that, as well as the building permits, and with various departments then also under budget. So with this resolution, we're proposing that $580,000 be transferred to be used for different uses. But on top of that $580,000, on page 121 of your packet, you can see that there's a calculation that shows us the unassigned fund balance in excess of a reserve. And according to our policy, we want to keep 50% of next year's budgeted expenditures in our reserve. The big reason for that is we just don't get our tax settlement until July, our first half, so we want to make sure we have enough liquidity to then pay our bills. But we do have some amount on top of that, that we do have the ability to then, in addition to the surplus, use for other purposes. Please note in that, almost 2 million excess of reserve, the 2018 surplus is included in that. So that is encompassing the 580,000. When we were making our staff recommendations, we thought it was really helpful to look at the interfund loans that were outstanding. So those are also shown in my staff memo as well. With all of this information, we came up with about 3 uses of this surplus or unassigned fund balance. We're proposing to forgive one of the loans given to park dedication from water, and that was for the Fenway Athletic Park project. We're looking for a transfer of $25,000 of this surplus to the Park Dead Fund for Belt Park Master Planning, as well as a transfer of $500,000 to capital improvements for future street improvements. We will say though, with the updated information, if you look at the Capital Equipment Replacement Fund 401, we've had some updated information since your packet came out. I do think that we should entertain also some questions or ideas on looking at helping to fund this fund. And you can see in 2021 we're running a deficit for that capital equipment. So I'm open to any questions.
So maybe just a quick walkthrough of the 2018 results that you just gave us. Maybe a couple items to note. So 2018 had a surplus of almost $580,000. A couple of points to that that I think is important to point out is that $423,000 of that is from revenue, and of that revenue, a good portion of that is variable expenses or variable revenue that is either one-time or volume-related, is not recurring, and is not something that we necessarily can count on in future years. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to look at this, the surplus availability, especially as it comes from 2018, as being truly incidental surplus, if you will, and not necessarily that is going to be repeatable in 2019. Yep. That said, it's an incredibly great place to be. And one-time, think of it as one-time contribution to surplus rather than recurring. So I think that's important. And then on top of that, we have a history then of also having excess surplus. And so of the total amounts, is at the 733,000. It's it's an additional amount from previous year's surplus balances to still put us within line of overall required surplus.
Correct. The 733 encompasses the 580.
Right.
Yep.
I'd appreciate kind of a walk through those revenue line items, just what's included, particularly the miscellaneous line item. If you can just kind of help me understand, we're significantly over our projected revenues on a couple of these, and I think that would help clarify not only for me, but perhaps those that are watching or kind of paying attention to this.
Yeah, so some of our biggest items are licenses and permits as well as miscellaneous revenue. On page 2, you can see some of those explanations for those numbers 1 and 2. So the biggest one for our licenses and permits was building permits. That was 183 over. There's also miscellaneous other permits, gas and heating, plumbing, planning and zoning. Right now, with the economy, almost all cities are seeing a surplus with, coming in higher than budget on those licenses and permits. We like to budget conservatively, just so that we're not budgeting those too high. And for the miscellaneous revenue, the biggest ones that we got there was about $35,000 from donations. Many of those donations were capital related for fire as well as parks. An insurance recovery, so I think there was some damage to a light pole that we then recovered from our insurance, as well as some other refunds and reimbursements, and there was a lot in there, but miscellaneous things from vendors, if we had an overpayment or a credit balance that had carried over from previous years, was then returned to us.
Okay. Helpful, thank you.
With maybe kind of breaking this out into multiple pieces, does the source of the 733,000 to be transferred, does the source of that make sense to council of how we got to that number? And
Yes.
so then maybe step 2 is, if that is the amount, then what do we do with it? And do you want to kind of walk us through a little bit more detail on the plans for transfer? I think some history maybe on, if you look at the memo, we're kind of water fund, park dedication fund, maybe some history on what created those fund balances would be helpful, and kind of
Yeah, I
clarify
know
what
the-
the goal is for.
Yeah, the
the
Park
end of today.
Dedication Fund for the Fenway Athletic Project borrowed money from the general fund to fund that facility. And it was split, the money was split between the water fund and the sewer fund. What we're recommending, if you go back to the water rate study and the discussion on increasing water rates, we want to put the water fund back on at its own place and not try to fool around with interfund loans, and make sure that that we don't have to raise rates indiscriminately because we've lent money out of the fund. So we want to, the reason sewer's not so involved, but the water is the really important one in my mind, that we get that back on a funding level that it's own, that it based on rates that support the operation, and not lend money out from that. So that's why that's important, I believe, to get the water fund back there and get the 200,000 to the water fund. At last meeting, you approved a bid for the master plan for Bellows Park, and we indicated there that we needed $25,000 for the master planning, and that we were going to recommend reallocation of surplus. So that's what's in there. We want to go forward with that this year and start the master planning for the redesign of that park. And finally, the $500,000 to the capital improvement plans. Going back to what the mayor said earlier, the revenues came in much better, as is pretty much the case here with most municipalities, that when building is good, you're always usually over with the revenue. If it's not only us, it's probably everybody. And really, it's a one-time revenue, because you can't count on this money year after year after year, because sooner or later, there'll be a recession or there'll be a slowdown in the building trades, and that money will go away. So you don't want to try to balance your budget on that entire amount of revenue. So we are considering the excess as a one-time revenue. And if it's a one-time revenue, we should spend it on a one-time expense. So we don't have to come here in September next year and say, well, we can't balance it because we used the excess to balance the general fund or whatever fund. So we want to be free of any, digging a deeper hole on any of the funds. So we're considering that revenue, one-time revenue. We're considering these a one-time expenditure. It's clean, it's done. We don't have to worry about that affecting anything. Our fund balance policy is met, it's healthy. Hopefully we won't have any downturn in the economy in the next few years, but if we came to the same place next year, we'd be recommending some other kinds of alternatives. We believe the $500,000 to the general fund capital improvements for future street improvements is a good idea. However, with recent information, we probably need to change that a bit. With the fire truck and the capital equipment, we probably should split that for $250,000 to the equipment replacement fund and $250,000 to the capital improvement fund. That's what we're going to ask you to change that. So.
And then historically, park dedication fees new park dedication fees that come in, half of them have gone towards paying off the interfund loan.
Correct.
In the future, do we still continue that policy, and they just now go all towards repaying the sewer fund?
The remaining balance in the loan from the sewer fund will continue to be paid off buy the park dedication fees. It'll pay that off quicker. Plus, we will then put the park dedication fees, hope on the park fund on a better footing as well, so that the revenue that's supposed to be targeted for park improvements and things can be targeted for park improvements. And when we get to some other situation down the line where we're talking about capital improvements at park, we'll have a different discussion on how to fund that, what we should be doing there.
Other questions? Comments?
So it just sounds like much better financial management to me. So, makes sense. And I would just make the comment on, around the, statement that you made a little bit, Patrick, don't use these kind of one-time overages to balance your budget, which was really, we were hit hard with that statement during our financial session at the League of Minnesota Cities training. So I agree with that.
Yeah, there are certain revenues in the general fund that can be volatile, and you have to be aware of those volatile revenues, that they're not always going to perform. In many cities, they have different types in different places, but especially in the building, in this particular case, you can lose it next year, just like that. So you don't want to depend on that, because if you do that, like I said earlier, you could just dig yourself a bigger hole for the next year's budget.
I think we've seen benefits recently of having a well-funded capital improvement plan and being thoughtful on how we're using debt and the current pay-as-you-go program, but that does require some ongoing funding, and our current capital improvement plan does have us in a deficit balance, so the additional split, if we're going to do 250 to equipment and 250 to general fund capital, or was it streets? Streets. I think is a healthy use of those excess dollars, and makes future conversations on budgeting that much easier, because we still do not yet have a fully funded capital improvement plan, would be my perspective. Any other comments or questions? If none, I will entertain a motion.
Does this need to be amended to reflect the 250?
Yeah, I believe the resolution, I have to read it real quick here. Yes, the resolution number 3 has to be changed to a transfer of $250,000 from the general fund to the capital improvements fund for future street improvements, and add a number 4, a transfer of $250,000 from the general fund to the capital equipment fund to fund capital equipment replacement.
Thank you for clarifying.
I make a motion to adopt Resolution 04-08-19-01, transfer of monies as outlined by Finance Director Hannah Lynch and amended,
As amended?
as amended by Patrick Casey. That adequate?
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Next up, 2019 state aid street improvements. Bid results, award recommendation. Ryan, is this you?
Are we on C?
Yes.
Yes.
We are on C. Yes,
Yes.
comprehensive road transit funding, which is not you. Patrick, are you?
Yeah, this is,
Help me, thank you.
yeah, currently in the legislature, there's a number of proposals that would increase the funding for roads to the local municipalities. We would like to see that happen because we are way behind on our road paving projects, and with no real sign of catching up in the pretty near future. So this basically outlines this asks for the council's approval, that the legislature pass a comprehensive and balanced transportation fund package that permanently increases dedicated fundings for transportation, that the council will define a comprehensive and balanced transportation funding package as an innovative and permanently increases the dedicated funding for state and local and transportation systems in the greater metropolitan area, and that the omnibus, and I always have a problem with that, omnibus transportation funding bill, which provides additional dedicated revenue for city streets, including the funding that can be used for non-MSA city street maintenance, constructions, and reconstruction. So it's basically asking the legislature to find a way. We're not endorsing any particular plan, as everybody's heard on the news, whether it's a 20% gas or 10-cent gas or anything, but we're asking them to take a comprehensive look at this and try to come up with a long-term solution to assist not only us, but the rest of the cities in the state to pave the roads.
Maybe quick take on comments from Administrator Casey's comments. The resolution in front of us is a recommended resolution that was drafted by the League of Minnesota Cities and is being, cities are being asked to consider as part of overall efforts. I will say, and part of my council update at the end of the meeting, we'll talk a little bit about meetings at the Capitol recently related to funding. Is funding relates specifically to Forest Lake, although we have the benefit of having a lot of local state highway dollars because of our proximity to state highways. A lot of times those projects also include state share or local share, and those local share dollars then impact our ability to do our own municipal streets. A great example of this is the design of the current solution for Goodview and 97, which as a community, we have said we want some pedestrian facilities. MnDOT has said we will help with the roundabout, but there currently is not a pedestrian solution, an off-grade pedestrian solution, and that would be a local share. An example of where just additional monies available to this local municipality would give us more funds to be able to do those things, as well as, because again, doing those things means we don't have as much money for regular street improvements and maintenance plans. So it's a combined mix, and what we're asking for is for some legislative assistance and state budgetary assistance to meet those local transportation needs. The point was well made at the Capitol that every transportation is important to commerce, and every single trip that starts that commerce network starts with a local municipal road. And so the better shape those are in, the better able we are all to have the commerce activities that we want, and that's a state and regional need. So that's what we're looking for.
So it's just a request, and so that's what we're looking for. That's all we can do.
It's a vote of
Yeah.
support, correct? Any other questions or comments on this particular item?
No, I was glad to see this on tonight's agenda, and I know this is an issue across the state. It's not exclusive to us in our community here, and I just really feel strongly that we need to continue to press our policymakers, and I urge our constituency, I know our council is doing their part, but I urge our constituency to do that as well. We really need support for the dedicated and sustainable resources to get this work done. The underinvestment it's just kicking the can down the road, and so it's important because it costs us more in the end if we continue to delay. So I know that there are a lot of creative opportunities before them, a lot of creative funding proposals in front of the legislature this year, and I hope that they will pick one. So,
Any other comments? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept resolution number 04-08-19-02, a resolution requesting comprehensive road and transit funding.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Ryan, we're to you, 2019 state aid street improvements.
Mayor, City Council, in your packet is a bid results and award recommendation for the 2019 State Aid Street Improvement Project that includes portion of Centennial, 11th Avenue Southeast from 61 to South Shore, 15th Avenue Southeast from South Shore to 11th Street Southeast, and then 11th Street Southeast down to Highway 97. First two bids were below engineer's estimates, so we're within project budget. At this time, it's our recommendation per the resolution to award the contract to Dressel Contracting in the amount of $1,371,117.09 to Dressel Contracting. Contractor does plan on starting potentially the last week of April, obviously pending weather, but we'll hit it hard, and there are some contract requirements within this contract with the 4th of July parade and Leela School, so those have been accounted for. With that, I'll open up with any questions, otherwise it's per the resolution awarding the contract for the 2019 State Aid Street Improvement Project to Dressel Contracting.
For the sake of argument, I'll make a motion that we approve the bid from Dressel Contracting for $1,371,117.09 as presented by Bolton and Mink.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Point of clarification, Your Honor, is that a motion and a second to approve resolution number 04-08-19-03?
I'm sorry, I should have included that. But this is it here, okay.
Where is that resolution?
Yeah, I don't see that either.
It's on the
That's why
dais.
I didn't see, I skimmed over it, so I'm sorry.
Oh,
I can-
it was the extra handout this evening.
I can restate the motion if need be.
I don't have the handout. Can I just borrow yours?
You bet.
The motion should have read, I make a motion that we adopt resolution number 04-08-19-03, awarding the contract for the 2019 State and Street Improvements Project to Dressel Contracting with a net total base bid in the amount of $1,371,117.09, and authorizing the mayor and the city administrator, city clerk to sign said contract.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Ryan, how do we choose what gets seal coated? Is there a rotation through the city or every 5 years, or how does that work?
Oh, you're on the next one?
Next item.
What? Oh, I apologize. I have no questions.
We'll save it for next time. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Councilmember Gerard's really excited to hear about the 2019 Seal Coat project. Ryan?
Mayor, City Council, in your packet is a request to authorize preparation of plans and specifications for the 2019 Seal Coat project, which does include crack filling. So the city goes through a annual budget annually, you know, and then through that is we have a 5-year CIP developed. 1-2 years are pretty steady, you know, but as, you know, like a harsh winter we just gone through, some roads have to adjust and, you know, that need to be dealt with now. But yeah, there is try to follow rotation based on funding levels at the time and current needs. So, and working closely with Public Works on what they see out there daily, and you know, here's where we've already allocated the budgeting for the project, and this is what's needed. I mean, we could do more, but this is the budget. So if bids come in favorable than what's shown on the map, we do extend the projects to stay within that budget to get more lineal feet per a bid contract. State statute allows us to add up to 25%. So our thresholds are, I guess, our cutoff points would be the 25% additional to it or the budget. So those are field decisions to stop here and there based on where we are with quantities on a daily project like this. So the crack filling probably will be all completed within 2 to 3 days. The seal coating on this size of job, 3 days, maybe 4 if weather is bad, one of them. So it goes relatively quick, and we just check quantities as we go, and then have provisions in the contract where to go, you know, kind of just continue down a roadway that's in the same area. So that's kind of where we get. So it's you'll see this process start once the budgeting season starts and the roads portions presented. So I hope I answered your questions, but.
Very well, thank you.
So this project's obviously very quick, you know, there's not really much to the plans and specs. So with the next city council meeting, we'd come back to approve plans and specs and authorize that for bid. Because it's over the state statute of 175, you need to do the public bid process.
Ryan, I know this is, the work being done is a fairly quick process. What happens for notification of residents in these areas that are impacted or?
The
for a project
contractor's
like this?
required, part of the contract, to put up no parking signs and notification of the work. So even though the work might lag over that time period, you basically can drive on it right away. So it's a moving operation, train operation. The loose aggregate stays 3 to 5 days, so the wheel, traffic of the wheels pushes and meets it into the emulsion. And then we come with we require 2 sweepings, an initial sweeping to get all the loose stuff off. Y signs are still up throughout that period, loose gravel signs. And then we require a second sweeping to come, I believe it's 30 days, so we require ballpark around there. Just, you know, in the events, you know, you come running into a hot summer, you get 90-degree days, you do get some more loose gravel kicked up or people turning around while that material's curing in. So just as a requirement we've always done, just, you know, it's that, you reduce the tracking into people's garages and stuff like that, so. Or into the gutters and ring and storm structures, and Public Works had to clean it out, so.
Very good. Any other questions? Entertain a motion?
I make a motion to authorize preparation of plans and specifications for bids for the 2019 Seal Coat project.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Water supply plan, next up. Ryan, this is also you?
Mayor, City Council, so final step of, this would be 4 years of the water supply plan adoption, which is required every 10 years, state statute, because we have a population of public water over 1,000 people and drawn out of the aquifers that's DNR controlled. So we started this in late 15, early 16, which included a wellhead protection plan, phase 1 and phase 2, that's required every 10 years too, and then the water supply plan. So the water supply plan, the final document was submitted in 18 to the DNR. Review has been completed by the DNR and approved. So it's a lot of paperwork in it. What I have on page 1 of this agenda item is the certificate of adoption that the DNR has asked for the city to adopt at this point in time. The next letter is the approval letter from the DNR, completing their review and everything fulfills the Met Council's requirements in the DNR. And then also the local water supply plan approved checklist that included comments from the Met Council, Minnesota DNR, and Washington County. And then the big item behind that is the actual water supply plan that was submitted. So we're just kind of wrapping up the water supply plan. The water supply plan was obviously approved by the city council previously prior to submitting to the DNR for formal review. Now we're just all done through that process. And last thing here is the Minnesota DNR has asked for a certificate of adoption. And then again in 2028, we would start this process 2 years before that to re-adopt again in 28. Some pluses, I guess, out of this year's, or this development, this phase of years, is we were able to significantly reduce the wellhead protection area based on more modern, better technology on groundwater monitoring and the models generated. So that obviously reduces the cost of plans moving forward because you're really looking at a smaller area. The things that might change with that, obviously we're talking about a new well, new treatment plant, southern portion of town, so we'll have another wellhead protection plan developed as part of future plans. So a lot of stuff with this. Don't expect you all to know it if it's new to you now, but this really started in late 2015, early 16. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions of Ryan?
Ryan, I noticed there were numerous recommendations throughout this document. What action do we take on these
A lot of them
recommendations?
are outlined in the plan or your comprehensive plan.
Okay,
And then some have already been done, actually.
oh, okay,
It's just the lag time for them to get this back.
okay.
You know, one in here, they talked about a required monitoring well, which we got it to be okay to go into the Mount Simon. That's where we really want to go with the future wells, even though there's a moratorium on it. So there's things that we worked through that's already been incorporated into the water capital improvement plan that was adopted with the rate structure. So it's, the things that would be done in the long-term future already, the financing has been identified for, say, if the revenue comes in per the rates approved and development and stuff like that. There's, one other action item will come back within, I can't remember how many days it requires. It's related to conservation, but, yeah, we're always doing a lot of this stuff. And then with the treatment plant 1 and 3, there's some things that are gonna be done with that are suggested recommendations in here. But right now, where we currently stand, we have met all the requirements of the plan. We have an approved plan that DNR. That's things we'll talk about obviously during the budget season. If you guys wanna go beyond what's required, you always have that ability. You can do a water efficiency grant program. We've done that with grants. Some cities do it without the grant support. That's something that I've commented on regular at the legislation, that please fund that grant again, or otherwise, if you guys wanted to move forward on things like that, you would do it 100% financed by the user rates, right? So that grant reimbursement that we talking about was a rebate on high efficiency washing machines or low flow toilets. So they got a credit on their water bill if they went through that. So
Okay.
there's a lot of that kind of stuff out there, but probably best discuss at the next budget item.
Yep.
How aggressive or not aggressive you guys want to be.
And I did note a lot on the water conservation, so that helps immensely that, we're at least being thoughtful about that. One thing that kind of jumped out at me on page 143, under the emergency planning, was an interconnection with the city of Columbus and city of Wyoming. And at some point along the way, it was declined. What do we know? I mean, is that?
Again, that's an old comment in our comp plan. We talk about a future potential connection with Columbus and Hugo. Obviously, once infrastructure gets closer to the northern communities, maybe that's another conversation you have with Wyoming.
Okay,
So,
okay. That's all I have.
Ryan, one of the comments that is stated over and over is the moratorium on the Mount Simon Aquifer. And I know this is on your radar, maybe for benefit of new council members, there's a process that will have to be gone through when we do that next well. What is and for my own benefit, I guess, what is the time frame on when we need to be thinking about that? Because it's every opportunity that somebody had to make that point is pointed out in this document over and over again, so.
So in 2020, or 20, no, my plan stuff here. 21 and 22 is you would split the financing with the new well treatment plant. Prior to that, you'll go through a process and trying to get an approved well in the aquifer, right? Right now, our city wells, that serves our potable drinking water supply, is all within the Mount Simon. The Mount Simon's the deepest aquifer in the area by far. So our wells are about 600 some feet deep. There's 2 aquifers above them that are separated by confined layers. However, when you get into northern Washington County, those aquifers have a lot of fracture in between the confined layers. Thus, you might not be able to get the water rates out of that area that you would in the Mount Simon, but that's a process you'll go through. You'll probably do some test wells to benchmark all that, and then at the end of the day, if you show that your only potable water or your reliable water source here is the Mount Simon, then that's where you would work through that moratorium on that language. There are, it's not like the other aquifers are not healthy, it's just those are the aquifers that are shared with the concerns of the White Bear Lake stuff that we've all been a part of for 6-7 years now. So We would ideally want to stay out of those, but that might be a potential where your future well goes into those, so.
And when do our activities related to that have to start? When do we need this? Is it 2 years in advance? Is it,
You
When
would
do we need
have
to
to
meet?
go through that process a year before getting an approved well, so.
good to have on radar? One other question, like all plans, as soon as the plan's done, it's obsolete as soon as anybody leaves. So I noticed there's old staff referenced. We keep this plan up to date, and there is a more current version than what's in our packet. I'm assuming the answer is yes, is that, or how do those things get referenced? New city administrator, new school superintendent, contact information, basic items.
So Pat will sign the certificate of adoption, right? Obviously, they had old contact when they sent out the approval letter, but it's still addressed to the city of Forest Lake, so. It's not really, I mean, the name doesn't affect the plan,
Okay.
per se. The plan is the city of Forest Lake's
It's the
water
role,
supply
okay.
plan.
Are there questions?
They even spelled his name wrong.
I know. Noticed. This is a long document. So your requested action is to approve the certificate of adoption? Is that correct? Okay. Yeah.
Your Honor,
Yeah, go
can I
ahead.
ask a quick question of Ryan? So just to confirm, Ryan, that the motion would need to be approval of the water supply plan, which would then trigger the ability of City Administrator Casey to sign the authentication document, the certificate of adoption, which says that I certify the water supply plan has approved by the DNR has been adopted by the council. So is it fair to say the motion you're looking for is a motion to approve or adopt the approved water supply plan?
For the city council to adopt or approved plan.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I'll kick us off. I'll make a motion to adopt the approved water supply plan.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Chief Newman, fire truck purchase.
Mayor, members of the council, up for consideration is replacement of one of the two 1997 engine tenders. To give a little bit of background, both those trucks were purchased at the same time and delivered at the same time in 1997. They are 2,500 gallon engine tenders. Primary use is for shoveling water in unhydrated areas. Back in 2014, when we came up with the 5-year CIP plan, we put a value of $550,000 for a replacement cost. Once it was accepted in the 2019 budget back in 2018 and brought in front of the Joint Fire Board back in August of 2018, we formed a truck committee to determine needs, cost, purchasing options, and we received a quote back from Rosenbauer USA, which is the truck manufacturer up in Wyoming, for $679,729. That was an overage of $133,000 from what we initially put onto the CIP. A number of reasons for that increase in cost. The biggest individual is just difference in pricing from 2014 all the way up to 2019. There are a few other items like an upgraded motor and transmission, the use of electronic valves versus manual valves, enclosing the pump panel, communication equipment, hydraulic lift for drop tank, hot dip galvanizing the frame, adding a stainless steel dump chute and interior cabinets. When you add all that individual items up, that equates out to $133,000. So due to the increase, we brought it back up in front of the Joint Fire Board on March 14th, 2019 for direction, and unanimously they said to move forward with the purchase of the truck, and so I'm bringing it up in front of council to answer any questions that you may have.
Chief, this is coming to us tonight. Is this also have to go in front of the Columbus City Council as well for approval, or logistically, how does that work?
Since this was already part of the CIP, and this will actually stretch 2 budget years, if we put the purchase order in tomorrow, the cabin chassis doesn't even arrive till the 4th quarter. And so the portion of the payment that is due at that time is $289,610. So that's roughly $70,000 for Columbus, $220,103 for Forest Lake. So it actually gets spread across both, or 2 different budgets, the 2019 and the 2020. So Columbus will address that during budget season for the 2020 budget. And for us, our portion will be $220,103.60. That will actually impact the 19 budget. And then the remainder of that truck purchase will impact the 2020 budget. So the money that's actually there in the funds right now is more than what it costs to cover for 2019. So the additional will have to come out of 2020.
Thank you.
We all had an opportunity to talk individually with Al about this, and it all makes sense. It's $133,000, but it does make sense. There's no question about that. And what we've been dealing with that one of the older trucks, especially that tender that time, and we had to borrow a truck and all that. And for a city of 20,000 people, it doesn't make sense to me. And so I don't have an issue with what you're proposing here. That's just me, one vote.
It was a little bit of sticker shock for me coming in at between 23 and 24% increase over kind of the original or the approved dollar amount in the CIP. I guess I understand the increased cost of the steel potentially. I know I have some other colleagues in the industry, in various industries that are realizing similar cost issues with their steel purchases due to the tariffs. I understand that. I'm not quite sure about all of these additional add-ons here. Are these different than the original? I mean, the upgraded motor and transmission, all of these other things that are impacting that change. Are those new things you're adding on, additions to the original proposal?
Well, basically how I came up with the $550,000 originally is I invited a sales rep to come in and said to replace this truck identically to how it is back in 1997, to get that truck today in today's dollars, what would it cost? they gave me the price and the 550. And then when we set the committee up and actually discussed the needs and where you are for equipment and transmission and engine, I quickly found out that that was absolutely the wrong way to go about getting a price. And so I'm just due to a lack of experience in that whole process, I'm kind of eating crow a little bit.
Okay.
That's how we came up with that price.
Well, I appreciate your honesty, because my next question was going to be, isn't there a process in place to really evaluate this over time, right? We started in 2014 at 550,000, and before we head into a budget season, we should be able to take a step back and say, where are we at? You know, what is our solid figure for this? So this really caught me off guard, and I'd like to see it done a whole lot differently next time.
Yeah, you know what, if I was to do this over again, knowing what I know now, there wouldn't be that big a price difference. And you wouldn't be going through sticker shock, so I apologize for that.
I think that's a good comment as we start thinking about CIP planning for next year is these items the placeholders get put onto the plan, but going back and reevaluating, especially as steel costs have gone up and there's a lot of steel, we buy a lot of steel equipment, reevaluating that and making sure we don't have some other underestimated. And then also, so we're having the conversation on, are we replacing like with like? One of the items that and don't go down this path if it's not a big adjustment, but one of the items you mentioned in upgrade is moving to electronic valves from manual valves. And that's a new change, right?
The two trucks that we are replacing had manual valves. The last two trucks that we have purchased, the aerial truck and the engine one back in 2008, they both have electronic valves. And the big difference with electronic valves is, one, you get a condensed pump panel, but the design can be very similar from truck to truck to truck,
Right.
which then for training purposes, you're not training different pump panels over and over to all your engineers. It's one basic design, which makes it a lot easier for them to operate.
Is that a big driver in the cost, or is that pretty inconsequential?
I believe the upgrade on that was 22,000.
Other questions about the truck?
What happens to the current truck? Does it have value? Does it?
Limited value. One of them has, there's 4 trucks that we're replacing in the next 5 years. Of those 4 trucks, one of them's unrepairable. That's the tender one that we've taken out of service, and we've actually borrowed a vehicle from the DNR. That's actually older than the one that has a cracked frame to fill in. Then we have the 2 identical tender engines. One of those had a cracked frame that we were able to get repaired, but has both of those sister vehicles, they both have cracked water tanks up at the top. And so a decision was made, I believe last year, to not fix either water tank just because those trucks were coming up for replacement. As long as we could just monitor that crack to see if it has, increased in size. It was a considerable cost to replace both tanks. So as far as value, there's not gonna be much there. I'd be surprised if we were able to get 15,000 a truck.
There's also, I'm looking at the capital improvement plan in front of me and piggybacking on the comment that you just made about the number of trucks to be purchased in the upcoming years, finding ways to spread that out. And we are where we are of needs at this moment. But for future councils, 20 years from now, let's not have this, bundle of big equipment, especially difficult when you've got, identical trucks, the twins. Finding ways to spreading that out, but I fully recognize in this particular piece of equipment, it's needed today. I think you mentioned the delivery date, though. why such a long delivery date? And is there anything we can do to expedite? That's a long build cycle.
Everybody, all your manufacturers are in the same boat. Dave with buying equipment, you're out in dump trucks and other pieces of equipment. It's just the economy's doing well. They've got a lot of orders. Everybody's in the same exact boat. So there really isn't anything we can do to speed up the process other than get a shorter lead time from forming the committee, getting the pricing, getting the order in. This one did take a little bit longer because we're fairly new and we put a lot of time and effort into researching this vehicle because we know that the next replacement vehicles, a lot of that same technology setup will be replicated through the process, which will make them similar and easy to operate. So we spent a lot of extra time on this particular go around to work out those bugs, ask those questions, see what our options are. So I see moving forward, that whole process should go faster.
Any other questions? I will entertain a motion. No other questions?
Your Honor, just to clarify, there are two different resolutions in your packet related to this item. So the first is to join HGAC, which is the cooperative purchasing group, which allows the city then to purchase the equipment as outlined by the chief over there.
First resolution is on page 284 of our packet. Thank you, Bridget.
Can you clarify, what is it, is there a cost involved with joining that cooperative?
Yes.
Okay.
It's included in the cost of the vehicle and it's $2,000 to join that cooperative.
Okay. And what are the benefits of that? I mean, other than probably, a cooperative, you get cooperative purchasing, right?
Yep, it meets your, the requirements of the competitive bid process. It allows you to kind of cookie cutter pick what you're looking for equipment and get pricing. That's published pricing.
Yeah, they negotiate with whatever vendors. If it's not a fire truck, it's something else, but they negotiate the base model or the standard equipment and that's how they get the lowest prices they possibly can. So they say, okay, we're a cooperative, we'll go to the fire truck, we say, okay, we want this type of tender, and they say, what can you give our members? And they negotiate a standard, base, and then they negotiate each add-on, and that's whether they're doing, and I don't know how much of these they do, but they can do that with trucks, or they can do it with paper, or they do it with whatever. So that's what the cooperatives, they really satisfy the bid process that's required, but they drive down the prices as much as they can because they're representing a number of different entities. That's how they work.
Okay. All right, I make a motion to approve Resolution 04-08-19-03, authorizing the City of Forest Lake to join the Houston Galveston Area Council Cooperative.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. And the next resolution is on the next page, page 285.
I move to approve Resolution 04-08-19-04, authorizing the purchase of the chassis pumper, truck tanker body, and related items through the HGAC buy program at a cost of $679,729.
I heard a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just one final comment, that I would really like to see a process in place moving forward to take, when we're reaching the end of that service life, we know this is going to be coming forward. Let's get an update on those bids so that we can reflect that accurately in our budgets moving forward.
I'll just make a comment also about the importance of the pay-as-you-go plan and kind of fiscal responsibility of kind of maintaining those balances in the capital improvement plan. it's sometimes difficult to make the decision to put money there, especially when there's questions are, what else are we going to do with it? But that allows us to have those balances on big purchases like tonight, and I think that's important. Otherwise, we are levying or bonding for these types of purchases, and
I agree.
so,
It's just in this particular case, we really need this truck.
absolutely, agree.
And we had a good revenue generating year,
Yep.
Correct.
so that's helped us out a bit here too, so.
Yep.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Ace Hardware invoices, next item.
Move to approve Ace Hardware invoices in the amount of $16.15, $13.64, and $6.45 for a total of $36.34.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Abstain?
Abstain.
Motion carries. Okay, we are going to go into a discussion-only portion of the agenda for those watching either here or at home. These are items that historically have been covered in workshops, and we've been adding them to the agenda of regular council meetings to give us more discussion workshop time. No action will be taken on these items, or in this case, one item. It's a workshop session to start to formulate council opinion, exchange information, and in this case, specifically to our tobacco ordinance. Quick moment of history, we, recent council meeting put a moratorium on tobacco licenses, and we're going to talk about what steps do we want to take next as we reconsider ordinances and lift that moratorium. Turn it over to Patrick, Dan.
Mayor, members of council, just to echo what the mayor said, just here to kind of start the scope out process for what we want to study as part of the licensing tobacco update. Again, to briefly go on the background, 6-month moratorium was recently passed in the beginning of March. Now, while 6 months may seem like a long time, we also got to realize that we're 1 month into that moratorium, so we basically have 5 months left to get the study completed and the recommendations brought back to council. As part of that resolution that was passed back in March, there was a requirement to study city regulations and all the licensing requirements related to tobacco and nicotine. To kind of further enlighten, when the last time we did an update to the city code in terms of tobacco licensing, we did go back through in 2016 and provided some updates to our tobacco ordinances. At that time, however, the focus was probably more on updating the penalties for non-compliance. Did a couple of language changes, but a lot of focus at that time was on penalties if you had you failed a compliance check. And also currently the zoning ordinances do not impose regulations on stores selling tobacco products, so we don't have any zoning restrictions on store locations within the city. Basically, 2 major goals for tonight, just to kind of go over just a timeline for the study again. The clock is running on this. I kind of wanted to sketch out kind of an anticipated timeline. And the main meat of the conversation will be direction on what the study should review. So on your monitors right now is kind of an anticipated timeline as where we kind of sit right now. This on the right-hand side of the screen, if you look, the moratorium expiration date there on September 11th is when the current moratorium expires. And if you want new licensing requirements or any changes in advance of that moratorium expiration, I kind of backed off what the process would be to get us, to have new licensing requirements in place in September. Basically, at this point, April and May, we go over determine the scope of what we want to do, what we want to study, and then work on the work plan. So we kind of get those work plans dialed in after the scope is determined. May, June, and July would then start to execute on the work plan. That work would then be brought back for a council workshop so they can kind of check in and say, here's kind of what we're doing from a process perspective. Any changes, like the direction, don't like the direction. And then July, August, code licensing updates will be drafted and then changes brought back to council for consideration and possible adoption. Just kind of want to note that it'd be recommended to kind of do that in late July, early August. There are some statutory requirements for how long we have to post an ordinance. Right now it's 10 days, so Just want to make sure that we get everything posted properly, kind of through the correct process, so we're not right up against that September 11th deadline. So we'd be looking at probably late July, early August would be the recommended kind of timeline for that. So that's just kind of a rough timeline as to where we are, so you can kind of see, even though, again, like I said, 6 months seems like a long time, it does go pretty quick when you're kind of spacing out an update like such as this. Kind of went through and just started looking at what are some of the possible areas that we could start to evaluate, and just kind of give a starting point for conversation for tonight. One of the first things we looked at was tobacco 21. Basically, that is changing the age of purchase from 18 to 21. Some other cities within the state of Minnesota have already adopted similar ordinances that raise the purchase age. There's also been some conversation at the state level. The state itself may mandate at a statewide level to bring it up to 21. So that's an option. We can kind of go down that avenue if council desires. Additionally, we'd be looking at the possibility of banning certain flavored products. Some of the thought process here is that, you know, certain flavors of nicotine products appeal more to youth, and by not having them, you know, in the market, that kind of tends to kind of deter youth from picking up the habits. So there's another possible option there would be the additional kind of banning certain flavors of products. Another option would be the establishment of a new license that's kind of specific for retailers that only sell e-cigarette products. So these would be more like your vape shops, where they don't have them as a secondary product. It is the primary product that's sold. So these would be like a convenience store licensing. These would be for stores that sell only e-cigarette products. Currently, the regulation is that they're kind of grouped together. We don't have any really specific regulations, you know, specifically for e-cigarettes. They kind of just fall under traditional tobacco licensing. So we could look at establishing a new license category for e-cigarettes. We could also possibly look at the option of putting a limit on the number of licenses that are issued in the city of Forest Lake. Right now, we don't have a limit on the licensing. So as long as they meet the licensing requirements, you know, they're able to obtain a license. We don't have any cap on how many we can issue. So if everything else is okay on the license application, they're able to apply. Could look at potentially putting a limit on the number that we do issue within the city. Possible zoning changes, these would be more aligned with possible location restrictions, placing them a certain distance away from schools, for example, or other type of, you know, kind of limiting where they're able to be placed within the city. Right now, as I said earlier, zoning code is pretty silent on this. We could put some restrictions if we did a couple of zoning changes, just to where a licensed tobacco retailer could be located within the city. And the last two here are when we kind of looked at, when I looked at the two recommendations, or the current ordinances, there's a couple of just kind of recommended things that we kind of at least bring forward, just more from one's an administrative, and the other one is just kind of a little bit of a hole in our current ordinance. Currently, our ordinance is silent on the regulation of electronic delivery devices. We do regulate delivery devices for tobacco products, so say rolling papers, for example. Those are regulated, those are under the tobacco ordinances. But when you look at like the vape pens, the mod kits, the other kind of accessories for vaping, our code is currently silent on that. So we recommended that whatever kind of goes forward, that we update the ordinance to do some type of regulation on the electronic delivery devices for nicotine products. And the last one here is more primarily just an administration, just to help to kind of clean up when our licenses expire. Current licenses, tobacco licenses, expire December 31st. A couple of years ago, we ran into, it was a process issue where we had some late in the year compliance checks that had a failure, so we were no longer able to administratively approve those licenses, but we did not have any more council meetings at the end of the year. So what ended up happening was we had to kind of adjust those renewals until the beginning of the year. This would move the expiration period from December 31st to January 31st. It also aligns our tobacco ordinance up with our liquor licensing, so both of those license packages come together at the same time. So that's more of just a recommended administrative change. It makes our process a lot easier. But those are just some kind of high-level starting points for conversation. Really looking for council feedback and direction as to what are the areas of tobacco ordinances that we want to look at, and then we'll take those back and get the work plan developed.
Thank you, Dan. Questions of staff, clarification, comments?
Madam Mayor?
Absolutely.
Dan, on the location of licensed tobacco retailers, is that everyone who sells cigarettes, gas stations, grocery stores? Everyone? It's not just a smoke shop over by Northern Tool?
Yeah, currently we don't, like I said, we have a tobacco regulation and then it's pretty broadcloth at this point. We don't, if you sell a product that is, basically a tobacco product or an e-cigarette product, you get a tobacco licenses. We don't differentiate between if you only sell tobacco products or if you sell them as like in a convenience store where it's kind of more of like they're selling other items in the store. Right now, we license them both the same. We license them both under one tobacco license. So from a location perspective, as long as they meet, the retail side, they're able to be placed within the city.
Thank you.
The comment I'd like to make, if you don't mind, is the flavored product ban. I mean, who would determine that? You know what I mean? That seems a little bit hard to regulate, and by whose determination what's flavored,
And maybe Bridget can elaborate on this one, because I know we kind of had a conversation last week, and that one was definitely kind of a tougher one to establish just for that exact reason, and maybe she could just kind of offer a little bit more elaboration.
Like to
on
hear
that.
it.
Sure. So Mayor, members of the council, there are two big areas that are more commonly, a number of cities are pushing it as far as the regulation standpoint is concerned when it comes to tobacco. The first is Tobacco 21. There is some pending legislation. I don't know what's going to happen with it this year at the state capitol. But right now, there are 31 Minnesota cities and counties as of April 2nd that have adopted essentially Tobacco 21 restrictions, which prohibit the sales of tobacco-related devices, products containing nicotine to individuals under the age of 21. The second component that some cities have been looking at is the banning of flavored tobacco products. And so that would be a ban on any product that contains a flavor other than essentially the flavor of tobacco or nicotine. So that would include both menthol products from the tobacco and cigarette standpoint, as well as the flavored tobacco or the flavored e-juice. Some of those include sort of candy flavors, bubble gum, Swedish fish, anything like that, as well as any other flavor, grape, menthol, you name it. And the logic behind it is that some of those flavors are targeted toward younger consumers. I mean, it's typically a younger crowd that might be interested in the candy type flavors, and so that would, again, discourage youth smoking. So the flavor ban is not as common as the Tobacco 21. I think there are 2 or 3 cities in Minnesota that have adopted some type of flavor ban. As I understand it, some have banned it entirely. Others have said, well, you can only sell flavored products at specifically tobacco stores, for lack of a better term. So if you're a retailer that caters just to tobacco products, like a smoke shop, then you could sell the flavored products. Otherwise, you could not. And as Dan was alluding to with respect to the zoning piece, so right now there are no provisions in the city zoning ordinance that address the location of tobacco retail establishments. And as was pointed out correctly, tobacco is sold at a number of locations. It's sold at gas stations, it's sold at convenience stores, it's sold at grocery stores, and it's also sold at establishments that primarily sell that as their product. When it comes to the zoning component, those are usually targeted toward smoke shops or vape shops or establishments where a certain percentage, say 90% of their retail sales, comes from the sale of these licensed products, which could include all of the electronic delivery devices, tobacco. So those don't typically touch the gas stations, things like that, because those are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. If that helps clarify.
How many licenses do we currently have issued?
I can look that up quick. I don't have that number off the top of
Okay.
my head. I mean, I know let me just do a quick.
Okay.
I think it's right around 27 or 29, one of those two.
I know there's a bunch of them, that's for sure.
One of the things I don't see on the list of things to be considered that I'd like us to add is some of the areas where we've had problems and what we've looked at on follow-up items to address those problems, specifically on being specific on what's required of training, and also being specific on what's asked in the application process around management structure, who's involved in the day-to-day operations, who's establishing the training, making sure that the training gets done. Because I think we have to keep in mind, we are talking about legal products, and those legal products do have a right to be in the marketplace. My goal is that we, significantly reduce the access to minors, or completely eliminate the access to minors. And so there's all kinds of things we could do around the products themselves, but they are going to be there. So let's just make sure that the people that are selling them, and that we're being responsible and having a strong enough criteria that we are giving those licenses to responsible license holders who are going to do the right thing day to day, hire the right people to do the right thing. So what can we require as part of the application process and then the ongoing licensing process? There were some very creative, I think back about a year and a half ago, we had a series of compliance challenges, and there were some very creative solutions that the industry brought to us on things that they wanted to or were already implementing, card scanners, training programs. There were some pretty robust solutions that were suggested. That would be great for us to consider as part of it as well.
I don't deny that those are some good solutions, but I would caution you against aligning with the industry recommendations, because they typically benefit the industry in the end. And there's a tremendous body of research behind that. So I don't know, this is a bit of a values question for me. And I do believe that our community is a reflection of our policy. So I would like to take a look, and I think I've lost the screen here a little bit, but I'd like to take a look at a number, of these potential solutions to this, kind of that density issue. I think, what is a best practice around placement of establishments against population in a community, for example? Are there best practices there? The zoning changes, the location with proximity to schools, I think is a potential good option here. I can see that flavored product ban could potentially be an enforcement challenge, Chief. Would that be a reasonable thing to say?
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of challenges. I think there's a lot of good ideas here, and I think there's definitely a need to really research what is working at some other cities and municipalities and what isn't working. But I came up with a bunch of ideas myself, just listening to you and getting the feedback on what you'd like to see. Mm-hmm. And I think we could come forward with some recommendations.
How about in terms of kind of enforcement and increased fines, and then, toughening some of that as well?
Yep, I definitely think that is definitely something we can look into. With the alcohol, over the years and working here for 20 years, seeing how the fines with alcohol have increased, and I know that's difficult on businesses and on cashiers, I get that, but you've also seen a decrease in the number of alcohol sales to minors. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, you've got younger kids that are selling these products, and they probably just don't even understand the seriousness of a fine and having that on your record going forward. Some things I was just thinking of is, maybe, I don't know if it'd be mandating, but having signs that each one of these businesses need to have up in their, on their wall stating what the fine might be and repercussions of selling mm-hmm. to a minor. So just those types of things I've been kind of thinking about.
Mm-hmm. I'd also be interested in examining a model policy around Tobacco 21. I just, why not take a look at multiple options potentially? I mean, obviously, we have 31 communities and counties in the state of Minnesota right now that have decided this is a good idea. for a variety of reasons, and what do they know that we don't at this point? And potentially to gather some information from those communities on, impact of that policy. Now, it might be kind of early for some of them. I know this is a fairly new movement. But it's important enough that even the state legislature is considering it. So I think it's worth us taking a look at it, at this point in time. And maybe in time, we may have a positive result from the state legislature, and that'll just pull that right off of our plate anyway. So as a potential option for us. So that would be my wish, my recommendation. That we look at a variety of strategies and try to find some place where we can all comfortably land. So,
Other questions, comments to staff? I have two things to add. One, we toggle in the conversation between tobacco and nicotine, and as these products morph, I think we need to be very specific about what it is that we are regulating, and then try to do what we can to future-proof that. The delivery mechanism is going to change, and as we say, it can't be rolling papers, but now it's e-cigs, and nobody has a crystal ball, but whatever we can do. And if it's not a tobacco conversation, is it truly nicotine that we're regulating? Let's be specific on what that is, because I think it's really not tobacco. It's a drug that is being dispensed, and however we define that.
Nicotine delivery.
It's nicotine delivery. And then I think we also need to be recognize that there are certainly other products that are not nicotine that are, we currently don't regulate in any way. And it's, but sometimes sold in the same businesses. So it's kind of be specific and try to make that somewhat delivery proof. And then I'm struggling with Tobacco 21. I am open to us considering it. I'm closely following what happens at the state on this topic. It's not highest on my list of priorities at this point. I want to keep it out of the hands of 15, 16, 17-year-olds first, and we're not doing a great job of that right now as feedback comes from the schools, and Chief Peterson can tell us all kinds of school resource officer situations. It is a crisis. I would hope we can move, Tobacco 21 is an important topic, but I think we've got an immediate need on just keeping it out of the hands of our youth first. But certainly open to seeing what some other cities are doing. We can include it as part of the conversation.
well, I think part of the argument there are the health implications. It isn't about adult, not adult, 18 versus 21. I mean, we saw that with alcohol. When the age changed from 18 to 21, we saw a lot of positive health outcomes, a lot of positive health impact as a result of that. And that's I'm not about overreach and overregulation either. I want to support businesses in this community. I want to support commerce in this community, but I would also argue that this moratorium actually benefits the existing businesses that are doing things right. So I just would like to take a look at this really comprehensively, and then again, maybe we can come to some consensus as a council on the direction to go with this. So,
Any concerns or comments on Dan's timeline as presented?
that's a lot.
It is. I think it's achievable, though. I think, if we get cleared, the earlier we get that kind of, and this actually helps quite a bit, just kind of clarify.
Yeah.
Because everything from a regulatory standpoint, like a zoning regulation is going to have a little bit different pathway than, just a simple ordinance update. So if we're kind of running them in tandem, we can get them sequenced out, but I think it's achievable.
Okay, doable.
Mayor, I would concur with you that I'm not too worried about the Tobacco 21. The closest place to me is actually out of the city. So it's, you don't have to go very far and still be able to get tobacco, and that's why I'm not a huge advocate of it from that standpoint. Statewide, I'm all for it. Illinois passed it today. But I don't want to I wouldn't push that to be the number one item. There's a lot of other stuff I think we need to clean up too.
Fair points. Very good.
What's on the damn paper? This is not a city council agenda meeting.
Alvin,
I think we should.
Alvin, we're meeting.
Break the paper.
Dan, do you have what you need from us?
I do.
Very good.
I think we've looked at some good options. I agree that, the tobacco 21 thing, as far as I'm concerned, I hope the state does it so we don't have to be, for that very reason. And, I think it's been kind of a proven thing too. If you can keep kids off that stuff until they're 18, they're not ever going to go on it. It's always done at that earlier age. And so a little more teeth maybe in the whole thing, bigger fines, whatever it takes. I'm all for that. So I think we've looked at some good suggestions here tonight. I was just concerned about how do you determine what's a flavored, I think Bridget's covered that pretty well. And so some things that we can certainly talk about in the future, in a future workshop, so.
Very good. Moving on, we'll do staff updates. Chief Peters?
I only have a couple of items for you. We have gotten the speed trailer out on a couple of occasions. Unfortunately now with the possibility of snow coming Thursday, we're gonna put it back into storage for a little while. So nothing happens to it. And we're just planning ahead for the spring and the summer. Today was gorgeous. Looking forward to that. We have Forest Lake Safety Camp coming up in June. I'll get those dates for you. It's either 12th and 13th or the 13th and 14th. That will be held here at the City Center again for the second year.
It's 11th and 12th.
11th and 12th. Thank you very much. So it's Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
And other than that, looking at getting the bike patrol back out there, getting the bikes tuned up, so you'll probably be seeing them in the next couple of weeks. And once again, talking about Thursday, just hopefully everybody still remembers how to drive in snow and icy roads, and just to be very careful. And hopefully this will be the last that we see. Other than that, if you have any questions for me, I have nothing else.
Chief Newman?
I have nothing unless you have something for me.
Very good. Dan?
Just to respond to Councilmember Bystrom's question with the number of licenses, I looked it up, we have 24. So Chief Peterson was close. Very close, I'm closer than I would have guessed. Just an update, I attended the Lakes Area Expo and we did some community outreach, for kind of starting the fallback from the ULI, kind of asking people why they love Forest Lake. While attendance was high at the Lakes Area Expo, people willing to fill out our one-page document was pretty low. I think we got a handful back. So I will get those comments assembled, but we'll try to continue that going at Arts in the Park this year. And I may look at trying to get a digital component as well, so we can just kind of keep that out in our social media realm and on our website, so people can kind of. It seemed at the Lakes Area Expo, people weren't necessarily, they verbally tell you, but they wouldn't want to fill the paper out, so. That's it.
Patrick?
Three things. We interview on Wednesday for a deputy clerk position, so hopefully we can get that filled very quickly. The finance director posting is closed, and we are going to be reviewing those applications for hopefully make a recommendation soon on that. And also closed was the RFP for the strategic planning, and we have actually 2 responses, so we will be looking at both those and trying to make a recommendation on that as well.
Perfect. Do we have an estimated timeline on when a recommendation might come to council? Is there a?
For the strategic plan?
For the strategic plan?
Yeah, we'll have to discuss that and how we're going to, what the process is to talk to those 2 candidates. I think we can figure something out fairly quickly.
How many applications did we get for finance director?
Around 12, I think it was. And about 30 for the deputy clerk.
Okay.
We'll be interviewing now 5 candidates for the clerk.
Perfect. Any other questions? Very good. Thank you. Bridget?
Thank you, Your Honor, no update.
Very good. Ryan?
Mayor, City Council, just a friendly reminder, the local street project bid open is tomorrow morning, so that project award letter will be brought to the next city council meeting for a potential award. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Questions for Ray? Very good, thank you. Dave?
Just one update, the compost site is open. I don't know what Rick's talking about, it's not gonna snow, so it'll stay up through the whole week, so it's gonna be nothing but sunshine and warm weather through the week, so, but
Promise?
I'm trying to promise. I'm hoping. But it's open Saturdays and Sundays, and then Mondays and Wednesdays, just like the last 3-4 years, so we've had pretty good turnout this weekend, and today was a good number of people too, so. I guess I do have one more. Gravel roads decided to fall apart this weekend. So just the residents that live out there, just have some patience. We're trying to get around. We're adding rock and grading, so we're trying to get to them as quick as possible. So we welcome the phone calls in, the ones that are falling apart, but we have one grader and only a number of trucks, so we're trying to fill them in. So that's all I have. If you have any questions for me.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Council updates, you want to kick us off?
Certainly. I also attended the Lakes Area Expo with Councilperson Munson, and Dan did a great job getting it all set up. And the big hit there was to schedule for Arts in the Park. A lot of people picked those up, and the USB drives with recycling rags on them. I also attended my first Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed Board meeting. It was very interesting. A lot of acronyms, so I'm not quite sure what they're doing yet, but it was interesting.
Very good, thank you. Sam?
Thank you. First thing that I did is I attended the Vietnam Veterans Program that took place at the Legion the other day here, a week or so ago, and it was very well attended. Roughly 400 people showed up, and the speaker was fantastic. He was a former dog handler and point man in Vietnam, and talked about his experiences, and some would send chills down your spine. And so it was just a great program, and it lasted, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours, and really enjoyed being there and talking to lots of people. And then I attended the Airport Commission meeting last Wednesday. Not a whole lot on the agenda there. We talked about our CIP and the possibility of just doing some maintenance work out there pending approval from the state of Minnesota. The school agenda was quite full and very interesting because the main topic there was to talk about what's going to happen with the new amount of money that they've influx of money, about $5.5 million per year and over the next 8 years. And you can go on the website and get one of these, and it'll tell you how the money's being spent. Mostly, basically what they're talking about making smaller class sizes, hiring more teachers, so that the money's going to be going into the curriculum and learning and that sort of thing. So that's, if you wanted to boil it down to a couple little things. Dan and I went to MnDOT Aeronautics last Friday for a kind of a wants and needs meeting, and it's what it was a MnDOT was listening to us to find out just how they should, present funding and that sort of thing, and how it's determined, and so we ended up being a panel of 5 people. Dan might want to expand on it a little bit. There were several people invited, but there were several that were going to fly in there that day, and the fog was so thick that they couldn't do it. So we were a panel of 5, and we were pretty well represented because it was 3 of us from Forest Lake out of the 5. So basically, we told them, get your checkbook out, we need help, that kind of thing. So, and let's see, there was, and then tonight I served on the Local Board of Appeal and Equalization Board for folks that just wanted to talk about their valuations on their taxes. I dealt with 2 couples. I think there was, 1, 2, 3, about maybe 5 couples that showed up tonight. So I think it's going to get resolved, and there was like 16 that have already been taken care of. So it was a busy week. I think that's about all I have right now. Thanks.
A little quieter for me, just acknowledging a little citizen communication for those who think being a city council member is really glamorous. Noisy Rooster on Juneau Avenue was creating some significant disruptions for the community, and I know Donovan is right on top of that. This is kind of a tricky zoning situation. Rural residential, as I understand it, which allows for animals, so hopefully trying to just work with the neighbor or the owner of the rooster to resolve that situation. A day in the life of a city council member. And then continued communication, as most of you know, about the dust and speed on Heath, and I know that we're trying to stay on top of that. Chief has had some of his officers out there, and is that one of the locations for the speed?
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
All right, great to hear that, thank you. Attended the Health Up Planning meeting. We have a senior center board meeting this week. The volunteer recognition luncheon that was actually scheduled for this week has been postponed to August or September, and I know some of the council members attend that beyond just the appointee. And I just want to mention the Legion's fundraiser, the Pie in the Eye for the 4th of July is coming up on April 19th, and I'm offered to take one for the city council team. Ms. Munson can't hold anything over me anymore for not jumping in the lake. And the City of Forest Lake Park Cleanup Day organized by the Lions is Saturday, April 27th. Meet at Lakeside Park from 10 to 11:30, clean up, and then back at 11:30 at Lakeside there for a Lions hosted lunch. So some good community events coming up as well.
Dan, do we have that Community Lakeside, can we do some social media, or is it on our website and do some posts for that?
It's on the list. It's not posted yet, but I'll get it posted.
Perfect, thank you. Prior to going to on spring break, Patrick and I attended a League of Minnesota Cities event at the Capitol related to transportation funding. And the message was really nonpartisan and not focused so much on how it is funded and some of the partisan politics of how that bill might be funded, but more around some of the local need and how those funds might ultimately be used by cities like Forest Lake. Also took an opportunity while we were there to have quick meetings with Representative Detmer and Senator Housley, so appreciate them making the time on a very busy day. Both were receptive and have sent some follow-up information to them specifically around the bills that are being considered and how that would impact specifically Forest Lake. So thank you for also the council for passing the resolution of support tonight. I think that also helps. Was away for spring break, recovering from spring break, recovering from being sick. Have had a number of conversations with a number of developers that are considering some projects in Forest Lake, also some business owners that are considering some expansion, so that's all exciting to hear. Tomorrow I will be attending Ranger Hour at the high school, I believe in the stepped learning area. We'll be doing a breakout session with students, so look forward to that. Thursday, there's another student group also having a session right after school, and I'll be doing a kickoff for them. So look forward to spending some good time at the high school this week, and have a full week next week as well. So, all right. With that, we are going to go into a closed session. Councilmember Byström.
I move to close the meeting pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.03 Subdivision 1B to consider strategy for labor negotiations, including negotiation strategies or developments or discussion and review of labor negotiation proposals conducted pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 179A.01 to 179A.25 with the following unions: International Union of Operating Engineers Local Number 49, representing Public Works. The closed meeting will be held in the Forest Lake Room and will commence immediately. Once the closed meeting is completed, the City Council will reconvene the open meeting portion of tonight's City Council meeting in council chambers. There being no further items on the agenda, once back in open session, the council will simply adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And we're closed.